The sun beat down like a hammer on an anvil, and Katherine Emerson knew she was going to die out here if something didn't change soon. She had been walking for 3 hours since she woke to find the wagon train gone. Nothing but wheel ruts in the dirt and her own bedroll where she had slept apart from the others after last night's argument with the wagon master. They had left her. Actually left her in the middle of the Wyoming Territory with nothing but the clothes on her back, a half-empty canteen, and the growing certainty that her stubbornness had finally gotten her killed. She walked east because east was where they were headed, though she had no illusions about catching up to 12 wagons with a 2-hour head start. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, rolling grassland punctuated by rocky outcroppings, and the occasional stand of cottonwoods that marked a creek bed. Most of those creeks were dry this time of year, late summer of 1876, and Katherine's tongue was already thick in her mouth despite rationing her water. Her feet ached in her worn boots, and sweat plastered her dark hair to her neck beneath her bonnet. She was 22 years old, bound for Oregon to marry a man she had never met, a shopkeeper named Gerald Watson, who had corresponded with her father before his death. That arrangement felt like something from another lifetime now, a foolish dream that was going to end with her bones bleaching in the sun, because she had dared to speak up when the wagon master tried to force himself on one of the younger girls in the party. The other families had turned their backs when Katherine confronted him. They needed him to get them to Oregon, they said. She was causing trouble, making problems where there were none. The girl herself, barely 17 and terrified, had denied everything when her parents pressed her. So Katherine had become the troublemaker, the unmarried woman with no family traveling alone who should mind her own business. She wondered if they felt any guilt this morning when they realized what they had done. Probably not. People had an impressive capacity for justifying their own cruelty. The sun climbed higher and Katherine's shadow shortened beneath her feet. She kept walking. What else could she do? Sitting down to die wasn't in her nature, even when death seemed inevitable. Her mother used to say she was too stubborn for her own good, and her father had called her his little mule. They had both died of cholera 3 years ago, leaving Katherine alone in a world that had very little use for alone women with opinions. She was considering whether to take another sip from her canteen when she heard it, the sound of hoofbeats. Katherine's heart leaped with hope and then immediately sank with fear. Whoever was coming might help her, or they might be worse than dying of thirst. A woman alone out here was vulnerable in ways that made her stomach clench. Still, she stopped walking and turned to face the sound, shading her eyes against the glare. A single rider emerged from a dip in the land, sitting easy in the saddle on a rangy bay horse. As he drew closer, Katherine could make out more details. A tall man in dusty range clothes, a dark hat pulled low against the sun, and a rifle in a scabbard on his saddle. He rode like someone who had been born on horseback, moving with the animal rather than against it. He slowed as he approached, and Katherine straightened her spine, determined not to show fear even though her pulse hammered in her throat. The rider stopped about 10 feet away and pushed his hat back, revealing a face that was lean and sun-bronzed, with gray eyes that assessed her with sharp intelligence. He looked to be in his late 20s, with a few days' worth of dark stubble on his jaw and the kind of weathered look that came from years of outdoor work. "Madam," he said, his voice a low drawl, "you appear to be in a difficult situation." Katherine lifted her chin. "My wagon train left without me. I'm walking to catch up." Something that might have been sympathy flickered across his face. "How long ago did they leave?" "I woke at dawn and they were gone, so perhaps 5 hours now." The man glanced at the sun, and then at the tracks in the dirt, his mouth tightening into a grim line. "You're not going to catch them on foot, madam. They'll be 20 miles ahead by nightfall." "Then I'll walk for more than a day," Katherine said, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. The rider was quiet for a moment, studying her with those gray eyes. Then he swung down from his horse with fluid grace, landing lightly despite his height. Up close, Katherine realized he was well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and lean-hipped in the way of men who made their living on the range. "I'm Quentin York," he said. "I work cattle for the Bar M Ranch about 15 miles south of here. And unless I miss my guess, you're about out of water and have no food or supplies." Katherine hesitated, then nodded. There was no point in lying when the truth was so obvious. Quentin untied a larger canteen from his saddle and held it out to her. "Drink. When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday evening." Katherine took the canteen with trembling hands, hating that she needed his help but not foolish enough to refuse it. The water was warm but tasted like salvation. She forced herself to drink slowly, though she wanted to gulp it down. "Jesus," Quentin muttered, more to himself than to her. He dug in his saddlebag and came up with a wrapped bundle which he opened to reveal dried beef and hard biscuits. "Here, eat something." Katherine wanted to refuse out of pride, but pride was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. She took the food and bit into the jerky, her stomach cramping with sudden hunger. Quentin watched her for a moment, then looked east along the line of wagon tracks, his jaw working. "Which outfit was it?" he asked. "Who's leading the train?" "A man named Silas Coburn." "We left from St. Louis in April." Quentin's face darkened. "I know Coburn. He's a bastard with a mean streak and wandering hands." He looked back at her, and understanding dawned in his expression. "You called him out, didn't you? That's why they left you." Katherine swallowed her mouthful of food. He was bothering one of the girls in the party. A child, really. 17 years old. I told him to leave her alone, and he didn't appreciate being told what to do by a woman. "So he abandoned you to die." Quentin's voice was flat, but anger simmered beneath it. "And the rest of them went along with it. They needed him more than they needed me." The words came out more bitter than Katherine intended. Quentin was quiet again, and Katherine could practically see him thinking, weighing options. Finally, he said, "I can't in good conscience leave you out here, madam. The nearest town is Opal, about 30 miles northeast. I can take you there, get you set up with a room and some supplies while you figure out your next move." "I have no money to pay you," Katherine said, the admission burning her throat. "I had $5 in my bag, but that was on the wagon. Everything I own is on that wagon. I'm not asking for payment. I'm offering basic human decency, which seems to be in short supply where your wagon train is concerned." Quentin offered his hand. "Come on. You can ride with me. My horse can carry double, and it beats walking yourself to death." Katherine looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face. She had been raised to be cautious of strangers, especially men, and everything about her situation screamed danger. But Quentin York's gray eyes were steady and honest, and more importantly, she didn't have any better options. She could refuse his help and die out here, or she could accept it and take her chances. She put her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm as he helped her over to the bay horse. The animal turned its head to look at her with one large brown eye, surprisingly calm about the prospect of a second rider. "His name is Dawson," Quentin said. "He's got a steady temperament, so he won't give you trouble. I'm going to mount up first, then pull you up behind me. You'll need to hold on around my waist. Is that acceptable to you, madam?" the careful way he asked, making sure she consented to the necessary contact, eased some of Katherine's nervousness. "Yes, and my name is Katherine Emerson." "Miss Emerson," Quentin said with a nod that was almost courtly despite their circumstances. He swung into the saddle and then reached down for her. Katherine grasped his forearm, and he lifted her with surprising ease, settling her behind the saddle. "Hold on tight now. It's a long ride to Opal." Katherine wrapped her arms around his waist, intensely aware of the solid warmth of him, the play of muscles in his back and sides as he gathered the reins. She had never been this close to a man outside her family, and the intimacy of it made her cheeks burn despite the gravity of her situation. Quentin clicked his tongue and nudged Dawson into an easy walk. "We'll take it steady. No point in wearing out the horse in this heat." They rode in silence for a while, the sun beating down and the grassland rolling past on all sides. Katherine's mind spun with everything that had happened, the fear and anger and sheer disbelief that her fellow travelers had left her to die. She had known people could be cruel, but this level of callousness still shocked her. "You said you left St. Louis in April," Quentin said after a time, his voice rumbling in his chest against her cheek. "Where were you headed?" "Oregon. I was going to marry a man in Portland, a shopkeeper." Katherine heard the emptiness in her own voice. "We've been corresponding since my father died. He seems decent enough, though I've never met him in person. But you were willing to travel 2,000 miles to marry him." "I was willing to travel 2,000 miles to have security," Katherine corrected. "A woman alone has few options, Mr. York. My father left debts when he died. I lost our house, and I've been working as a seamstress, barely making enough to keep body and soul together. Marriage to a settled man with a business seemed like the best path forward, even if you don't love him." "Love is a luxury, Mr. York. I was focused on survival." Quentin made a noncommittal sound in his throat. After a pause, he said, "What will you do now? You still planning to get to Oregon?" Katherine had been trying not to think about that. "I don't know. I suppose I could work in Opal for a while, save money for stage fare west. Or maybe I could find work there permanently. I'm a skilled seamstress and I can keep books. I'm educated. My father believed in education for women." "That's rarer than it should be," Quentin observed. "My own mother taught me to read using an old Bible and whatever newspapers she could get her hands on. She said ignorance was a cage and she wouldn't let me be trapped in it. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. She died when I was 15. Fever took her one winter, and my father followed 6 months later. Some people said he died of a broken heart." Quentin's voice was matter-of-fact, but Katherine heard the old grief beneath it. "I've been on my own since then, working ranches, learning the cattle business. It's a hard life, but it's honest work." "Do you like it?" Katherine asked, surprising herself with the personal question. Quentin was quiet for a moment, considering. "I like the land, I like working with horses and cattle, I like being able to see the results of my work at the end of the day. But it's lonely sometimes, being a ranch hand. You drift from place to place, never really settling, never really belonging anywhere." There was something in his voice that resonated with Katherine, a loneliness that matched her own. "I know what that feels like. I've felt adrift since my parents died, like I'm just floating through life without an anchor." "Maybe that's not the worst thing," Quentin said. "Being adrift means you can choose your own direction once you figure out where you want to go." Katherine thought about that as Dawson plodded steadily northeast, carrying them both toward Opal and whatever came next. She was aware of the sun beginning its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the grassland in shades of gold and amber. The heat was still oppressive, but there was a quality to the light that suggested evening would eventually bring relief. "Tell me about Opal," she said. "What kind of town is it?" "Small but growing. Maybe 300 people. There's a main street with the usual businesses. General store, saloon, hotel, a church, smithy, and a doctor's office. The railroad hasn't reached it yet, but there's talk of a spur line coming through in the next few years. If that happens, the town will boom. Quentin shifted in the saddle, adjusting his weight. It's a decent place, as frontier towns go. Sheriff's honest, and most of the business owners are straight dealers. You should be able to find work there and a boarding house to stay in until you get on your feet. You seem to know it well. I ride through there whenever I come off the range. The Bar M is south of Opal, so it's the closest town for supplies and such. I've gotten to know the people over the last couple of years. How long have you worked for the Bar M? About 3 years now. It's the longest I've stayed anywhere since my parents died. The foreman's a good man, and the owner doesn't cheat his workers. That's worth more than higher wages at a place where you can't trust the people you work for. Katherine found herself relaxing slightly, lulled by the rhythm of the horse's gait and Quentin's calm presence. He hadn't tried anything inappropriate, hadn't made her feel threatened or uncomfortable. He simply rode and talked with her like she was a person worth treating decently, which was more than she could say for most of the people in her wagon train. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. "You could have ridden past. You don't know me. You owe me nothing." Quentin was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "My mother was widowed for about 2 years before she met my father. She used to tell me about how hard it was, being a woman alone. People took advantage of her, tried to cheat her, treated her like she was worth less because she didn't have a man to stand for her. She said the only thing that saved her was the kindness of a few decent people who helped when they didn't have to." He paused. "I figure if I can be one of those decent people for someone else, maybe it balances out some of the cruelty in the world, and maybe my mother would be proud of the man I became." Katherine's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. "She would be," she said softly. "I'm certain of that." They rode on as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The heat began to ease and a breeze picked up, carrying the scent of dry grass and dust. Katherine found herself noticing small details about Quentin: the capable way he handled the reins, the straightness of his posture despite hours in the saddle, the way he scanned the landscape constantly, alert for danger or changes in the terrain. "Will we make Opal tonight?" she asked as the shadows lengthened. "No, it's too far. We'll camp when it gets dark, then make the rest of the ride in the morning. I have enough supplies for both of us, and we can make a fire if we find wood." He glanced back at her over his shoulder. "I'll sleep on the opposite side of the fire from you, Miss Emerson. You have my word on that." "I believe you," Katherine said, and realized she meant it. They rode until the light faded to purple twilight, then stopped near a small creek that still had water in it, a blessing that made Quentin nod with satisfaction. "Good. We can refill the canteens and let Dawson drink his fill. Horses need water more than we do." Katherine slid down from the horse, her legs trembling after hours of riding. She had to grab Dawson's saddle to keep from falling, and Quentin was there in an instant, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "Easy. You're not used to riding. Your legs need a minute to remember how to work." He guided her to a flat rock where she could sit, then went back to tend to Dawson, removing the saddle and bridle and letting the horse drink from the creek before hobbling him nearby to graze. Katherine watched him work, efficient and gentle with the animal. When Dawson was settled, Quentin gathered dried grass and what little deadwood he could find, building a small fire as the stars began to emerge overhead. The flames caught and grew, pushing back the darkness and providing welcome warmth against the cooling night air. Quentin shared more of his food with her, and they ate in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them. Katherine couldn't remember the last time she had felt this peculiar combination of exhausted and alert, grateful and uncertain. Her whole life had been upended in the space of a day, and yet here she sat, safe for the moment, with a stranger who had shown her more kindness than the people she had traveled with for months. "What are you thinking?" Quentin asked, his gray eyes reflecting the firelight. Katherine considered lying, offering some platitude, but decided on honesty instead. "I'm thinking that I should be more frightened than I am. I'm alone in the middle of nowhere with a man I met hours ago. Everything I owned is gone. I have no prospects and no plan, but somehow I'm not terrified. I'm not sure what that says about me." "Maybe it says you're stronger than you think," Quentin suggested. "And maybe it says you have good instincts about people. You trusted that I wasn't going to hurt you, and you were right. Were you military?" Katherine asked, the question coming from nowhere. "You move like you've had training." Quentin's mouth quirked in a small smile. "Observant. Yes, I served during the final years of the war. I was 16 when I lied about my age and joined up, 17 when the fighting ended. I saw enough to last a lifetime, then came west to try and forget it." "Did you? Forget it, I mean." "No, but the land helps. The work helps. Being out here under all this sky, it makes the old nightmares seem smaller." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a shower of sparks. "What about you? Any nightmares you're running from?" Katherine thought about her parents' deaths, the slow degradation of losing everything her father had worked for, the desperation that had led her to agree to marry a man she had never met. Just the usual ones. Loss, loneliness, the fear of ending up with nothing and no one. "You're not alone right now," Quentin pointed out gently. "And you're not nothing. You're a woman with skills and education and a spine straight enough to stand up to a man like Silas Coburn, even when it cost you everything." "That's worth something, Miss Emerson." The words settled over Katherine like a warm blanket, soothing places inside her that had been raw and aching. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for helping me, for treating me like I matter. You do matter." Quentin met her eyes across the fire, and something passed between them, a connection that made Katherine's breath catch. "Get some rest now. We'll make an early start in the morning." Katherine lay down on the opposite side of the fire, using her bonnet as a pillow, and wrapping herself in a blanket that Quentin had given her from his saddle roll. She watched the stars wheel overhead, listened to the crackle of the fire and the quiet sounds of Dawson grazing nearby, and found herself thinking about the man across from her. Quentin York was handsome in a rugged, weathered way, but that wasn't what made her pulse quicken when she looked at him. It was the decency in him, the quiet strength, the way he treated her with respect and kindness even though he had nothing to gain from it. It was the loneliness in his voice when he talked about drifting from place to place, a loneliness that echoed her own. She told herself she was being foolish. She had known him for less than a day. This wasn't some romantic story where a woman fell in love with her rescuer and lived happily ever after. This was real life, harsh and complicated, and Quentin was simply a good man doing a good deed. Tomorrow they would reach Opal, he would help her get settled, and then he would ride back to his ranch and his life, and she would likely never see him again. The thought made her chest ache in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. Katherine eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep, her dreams full of wagon wheels rolling away without her, endless grassland stretching in all directions, and gray eyes that watched her with something deeper than simple kindness. She woke to the smell of coffee and found Quentin already up, the fire rebuilt and a battered pot heating over the flames. The sky was pale gray with approaching dawn, and the air was cool and fresh. "Morning," Quentin said, offering her a tin cup of steaming coffee. "It's not fancy, but it'll wake you up." Katherine accepted it gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm metal. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it chased away the last cobwebs of sleep. She watched Quentin move around the camp, packing up his gear with practiced efficiency, and found herself memorizing details. The way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the competent movements of his hands, the line of his shoulders beneath his shirt. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "You're being ridiculous." They broke camp quickly, and Quentin lifted her onto Dawson's back before mounting behind her this time, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. "Thought we'd switch it up," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "This way you can see where we're going." Katherine nodded, not trusting her voice. Having him behind her felt even more intimate than riding pressed against his back, his body curved around hers protectively as they rode northeast through the growing light. The morning was beautiful, cool and clear, with the sun rising in shades of pink and gold. They passed through rolling grassland, saw a pronghorn antelope bounding away at their approach, and startled up a covey of quail from the brush. Quentin pointed out landmarks and wildlife, his voice a low rumble that Katherine felt as much as heard. "See those hills to the north," he said. "That's the start of the Bighorn Range. Beautiful country up there, but hard living. We're in better land here, good grass for cattle, water if you know where to look for it." "How did you learn all this?" Katherine asked. "Reading the land, I mean. Trial and error mostly, and listening to men who knew more than I did." "You can learn a lot if you're willing to shut up and pay attention." There was humor in his voice. "I was a cocky kid when I first came west, thought I knew everything. The land taught me different real quick." They rode on, and Katherine found herself relaxing into the journey, enjoying the simple pleasure of moving through this wild landscape with Quentin's steady presence surrounding her. They talked about small things: birds and weather, horses and cattle, the challenges of frontier life. Quentin had a dry sense of humor that surprised her into laughter more than once, and she found herself smiling more than she had in months. Around mid-morning, buildings appeared on the horizon, small at first but growing larger as they approached. Opal, Wyoming was exactly as Quentin had described it. A frontier town with a single main street lined with wood frame buildings, some painted, others bare weathered planks. There was a false-fronted general store, a white church with a modest steeple, a squat building that proclaimed itself the Blue Eagle Saloon, and a two-story structure that had to be the hotel. A few people were moving about, going about their morning business, and several of them waved to Quentin as he guided Dawson down the main street. He returned the greetings, seemingly well-known and respected here. He stopped in front of the hotel, a relatively neat building with a sign that read Opal Hotel, clean rooms, fair prices. Quentin dismounted and then helped Katherine down, his hands steady on her waist. "Let's get you a room first," he said. "Then we'll see about getting you some supplies and talking to people about work." Katherine's throat tightened. "Quentin, I told you, I don't have money for a hotel room. I can't pay for anything until I find work." "I know, I'm covering it." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "Think of it as a loan if it makes you feel better. You can pay me back when you're on your feet. But right now, you need a safe place to stay and a chance to get cleaned up and rest properly." "Why are you doing this?" Katherine asked, searching his face. "This is far more than basic human decency. You're spending your own money on a stranger." Quentin looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. "Maybe I'm tired of being alone," he said finally, his voice rough. "Maybe helping you is the first thing that's made me feel like I matter in a long damn time. Or maybe I just can't stand the thought of leaving you without making sure you're truly all right. Does the reason matter?" "It matters to me," Katherine said softly. "I need to know this isn't charity. I need to know you don't think I'm some helpless creature who can't take care of herself." "I think you're one of the strongest women I've ever met," Quentin said, his gray eyes intense. "And this isn't charity. It's choosing to help someone I—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Someone I've come to care about. Even in just a day, I've come to care about what happens to you, Katherine." The use of her first name, the raw honesty in his voice, made Katherine's heart race. She was standing in the middle of a frontier street, dusty and exhausted and without a penny to her name, and this good, decent man was telling her he cared about her. It felt like something out of a dream. "I care about you too," she admitted, the words barely above a whisper. "I don't understand it, but I do." Something that might have been relief crossed Quentin's face. He offered his arm, a gesture that was almost courtly. "Then let me help you, and let's see where this goes, one step at a time." Katherine took his arm, and they walked into the hotel together. The proprietor was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pinned in a neat bun. She took one look at Katherine's dusty, bedraggled state and Quentin's protective stance beside her, and seemed to understand the situation without needing lengthy explanations. "Mrs. Douglas," Quentin said with a nod. "This is Miss Katherine Emerson. She's had some trouble on the trail and needs a room. I'll be covering the cost." Mrs. Douglas's expression softened with sympathy. "Of course. You poor dear, you look exhausted. Come on, let's get you settled." She took a key from the board behind her desk and gestured toward the stairs. "Room 4, top of the stairs to the right. It's one of my nicer rooms with a good bed and a wash basin. I'll have my daughter bring up hot water so you can have a proper wash." "Thank you," Katherine said, grateful beyond words. Quentin paid for a week in advance, which Mrs. Douglas accepted with a nod of approval. "You're a good man, Quentin York. Your mother would be proud." The words seemed to strike Quentin deeply. He ducked his head, color rising in his cheeks. "Just trying to do right, madam." Mrs. Douglas led Katherine upstairs to a small but clean room with a window overlooking the main street, a narrow bed with a colorful quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. It was simple and spare, but to Katherine, who had been sleeping on the ground for months, it looked like luxury. "You rest now, dear," Mrs. Douglas said kindly. "I'll have Molly bring up that water and then you can sleep if you need to. Breakfast is served until 10, lunch at noon, and dinner at 6. You're welcome to take your meals in the dining room downstairs." When Mrs. Douglas left, Katherine sank onto the bed, her legs trembling with exhaustion and emotion. Quentin stood in the doorway, clearly uncertain whether he should stay or go. "Thank you," Katherine said, looking up at him. "For everything. I know I've said it before, but I don't know how else to express what you've done for me. You don't need to keep thanking me." Quentin leaned against the doorframe, his hat in his hands. "I'm going to head over to the general store and talk to the owner, Tom Bradley. He's a decent man, and his wife runs a dressmaking business on the side. They might need help. I'll also ask around about other work opportunities." "You're not leaving today, are you?" The question came out more desperate than Katherine intended, and she felt heat rise in her face. Quentin's expression gentled. "No, not today. I told my foreman I'd be gone a few days when I left on my ride. I've got time." He paused, then added quietly, "I'm not ready to leave yet anyway, not until I know you're settled and safe. Will you come back this evening? Maybe we could have dinner together." "I'd like that." Quentin settled his hat back on his head and gave her a smile that made her stomach flutter. "Rest now. I'll come by around 6. After he left, a young girl brought up a pitcher of hot water and some towels, and Katherine spent the next hour washing away days of trail dust and exhaustion. She had only the clothes on her back, so she did her best to clean and repair them, grateful for her seamstress skills as she mended a torn seam and brushed out the worst of the dust. When she finally lay down on the bed, she expected to fall asleep immediately, but instead found herself staring at the ceiling, thinking about Quentin. She knew she was being foolish, letting herself develop feelings for a man she barely knew. But there was something about him that called to her, something that felt like recognition. As if her soul had been waiting for someone exactly like him. She must have eventually dozed off, because the next thing she knew, a knock on the door startled her awake. The afternoon light had shifted, and when she checked the small clock on the dresser, she saw it was nearly 6. "Just a moment," she called, smoothing her hair and dress as best she could. When she opened the door, Quentin stood there, cleaned up and in a fresh shirt, his dark hair still damp from washing. "You look rested," he said, his eyes warm as they took her in. "Good. I have some news if you're ready to hear it." Katherine gestured him into the room, propriety be damned. She was tired of worrying about what other people thought. Quentin came in but left the door open, a concession to her reputation that she appreciated even as she chafed at the necessity. "Tom Bradley at the general store is definitely interested in talking to you about work," Quentin said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "His wife Emma runs a small dressmaking business, and she's been overwhelmed with orders. She could use someone with seamstress skills. I also talked to the hotel owner, and Mrs. Douglas says she could use help with the laundry and cleaning if you need additional income." Relief flooded through Katherine so intensely that her knees went weak. "That's wonderful. Thank you, Quentin. I'll go see them tomorrow. There's more." Quentin's smile widened slightly. "I sent a telegram to the sheriff in the next county, letting him know about what Silas Coburn did. Abandoning someone on the trail is a crime, and if the wagon train passes through that county, Coburn will be arrested and questioned. At the very least, he'll have to return your belongings or compensate you for them." Katherine's eyes widened. "I didn't even think of that. I just assumed the things were lost. They might be, depending on whether Coburn kept them or distributed them among the other families. But at least there will be consequences for what he did. The frontier might be wild, but it's not completely lawless." Acting on pure impulse, Katherine stepped forward and hugged Quentin, her arms going around his waist. She felt him stiffen in surprise, then relax, his arms coming up to hold her carefully. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you for treating me like I matter. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for caring." Quentin's arms tightened around her, and she felt him rest his cheek against the top of her head. "You do matter, Katherine, more than you know." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the fading afternoon light, and Katherine felt something shift and settle inside her, like a key turning in a lock. This felt right. He felt right, in a way that nothing else in her life had for a very long time. When they finally pulled apart, Quentin's eyes were darker than usual, his expression intense. "We should go get dinner before I do something foolish," he said, his voice rough. "What kind of foolish thing?" Katherine asked, surprised by her own boldness. "The kind where I kiss you when I've only known you for a day and a half, and I have no right to take such liberties." Quentin's honesty was disarming. "I'm trying to be a gentleman, Katherine, but you make it damn difficult." Katherine's heart hammered against her ribs. "What if I don't want you to be a gentleman?" The words hung in the air between them, dangerous and thrilling. Quentin stared at her, conflict warring in his expression, and then he stepped back, deliberately putting distance between them. "Ask me that again in a week," he said quietly. "When you've had time to think clearly, and I've had time to make sure I'm not taking advantage of you when you're vulnerable. Because I want to kiss you, Katherine. God, I want to kiss you, but I want to do this right. I want to do right by you." The respect in his words, the careful way he was protecting her even from himself, made Katherine's chest ache. "You're a good man, Quentin York. I'm trying to be the man you deserve." He offered his arm again. "Come on. Let's go eat." and you can tell me about what you'll say to the Bradleys tomorrow." They had dinner in the hotel's small dining room, a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread that tasted like heaven after days of trail rations. They talked easily, sharing stories from their pasts, and Katherine found herself laughing at Quentin's tales of his early days as a ranch hand, when he had known next to nothing and made every mistake possible. "I once tried to rope a steer while I was standing on the ground," he said, shaking his head at the memory. "The damn thing dragged me about 50 yards before I had the sense to let go. I was picking dirt out of my teeth for a week. Didn't anyone teach you how to do it properly?" "Oh, they taught me. I just thought I knew better." Quentin's smile was self-deprecating. "I learned that lesson the hard way, like I learned most things. Pride makes for a painful education." Katherine told him about her own mishaps learning to sew as a girl, about the time she had sewn a dress with one sleeve inside out and hadn't noticed until her client tried it on. They shared stories about their parents, about what it was like to lose them and have to find their way alone in the world. By the time dinner was over, the sun had set, and the street outside was dark except for the light spilling from windows and the saloon down the street. Quentin walked Katherine back upstairs to her room, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. At her door, he paused, looking down at her in the dim hallway light. "I'm going to sleep in the barn tonight with Dawson. Save money on a room, and I like sleeping near my horse anyway." "When will I see you again?" Katherine tried to keep the anxiety out of her voice. "Tomorrow morning. I'll come by at 9 and we'll go talk to the Bradleys together." Quentin reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so tender that Katherine's breath caught. "Sleep well, Katherine." "Good night, Quentin." She watched him walk down the hallway and disappear down the stairs, then went into her room and closed the door, leaning against it and pressing her hand to her racing heart. She was in trouble. Deep, dangerous trouble, because she was falling for Quentin York, and she had no idea if he felt the same way, or if he was simply being kind to someone in need. The next morning, Katherine was up early, doing her best to make herself presentable with her limited resources. She was waiting in the hotel lobby when Quentin arrived at precisely 9 o'clock, looking freshly shaved and alert despite having slept in a barn. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "Ready," Katherine confirmed, though her stomach was full of nervous butterflies. The general store was busy with morning customers, but the proprietor, Tom Bradley, made time to introduce his wife Emma, a pleasant woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and capable hands. Emma led Katherine to the back room where she did her sewing work, and Katherine's heart lifted at the sight of fabric bolts, thread spools, and a good treadle sewing machine. "Quentin tells me you're an experienced seamstress," Emma said, getting straight to business. "I've got 3 dress orders I'm behind on, plus mending work that's piling up. If you can show me you know what you're doing, I can offer you steady work at fair wages." Katherine rolled up her sleeves. "Give me a test. Let me show you what I can do." Emma handed her a torn shirt and some thread. Katherine examined the tier, chose her needle and thread, and executed a neat repair that was almost invisible when she finished. Emma inspected it closely, then nodded with approval. "Very nice. Clean stitches, good tension. All right, Miss Emerson, you're hired. I'll pay you $2 a day, 6 days a week. You'll work here in the back room and I'll provide lunch. Does that suit you?" It was fair wages for the work, maybe even a bit generous. Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, thank you, Mrs. Bradley. You won't regret this." "I'm sure I won't." "Can you start today?" Katherine glanced at Quentin, who was watching from the doorway with a smile on his face. "Today is perfect." She worked through the morning and into the afternoon, falling into the familiar rhythm of needle and thread. It felt good to be doing something productive, to be earning her own way again. Emma was a demanding but fair taskmaster, and they worked well together, chatting about life in Opal and the various customers whose clothes Katherine was mending. When the shop closed at 5, Katherine emerged to find Quentin waiting for her, sitting on a bench outside with Dawson's reins in his hand. "How did it go?" he asked, standing as she approached. "Wonderfully. Emma's already paid me for today." Katherine couldn't keep the pride out of her voice. "I'll be able to pay you back for the hotel room before the week is out. I'm not worried about the money." Quentin fell into step beside her as they walked back toward the hotel. "I'm just glad you found work that suits you." They had dinner together again, and afterward Quentin walked her upstairs. At her door, Katherine turned to face him, gathering her courage. "It's been a week," she said softly. Quentin's brow furrowed in confusion. "What? You said to ask you again in a week." "It's been more than a day now, closer to 2. And I know my own mind, Quentin. I'm not confused or vulnerable or making decisions I'll regret. I know what I feel." Understanding dawned in Quentin's eyes, followed by something that looked like hope. "Katherine." "I'm falling in love with you," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know it's fast, and I know it's probably foolish, but it's the truth. You've been kinder to me than anyone in my entire life. You've treated me with respect and decency and care, and when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. So yes, I'm falling in love with you, and I needed you to know that." Quentin stared at her, his expression a mix of wonder and something deeper, something fierce. Then he stepped forward, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a soft press of lips that made Katherine's toes curl in her boots. Then Quentin deepened the kiss, and Katherine's hands came up to grip his shirt, holding on as the world spun around her. He tasted like coffee and felt like home, and when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that this was right. He was right. "I'm falling in love with you too," Quentin said, his voice rough with emotion. "From the moment I saw you walking east with your chin up and fire in your eyes, refusing to give up even when everything was against you. You're brave and strong and beautiful, and I don't know what I did to deserve finding you, but I'm not letting you go, Katherine. Not if you'll have me." "I'll have you," Katherine whispered. "God help me, I'll have you." Quentin kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I need to go back to the barn tomorrow. I've been gone longer than I said I would, and they'll be needing me. But I'll come back every chance I get. Every Sunday, at least. And we'll figure this out, Katherine. We'll figure out how to build a life together. Promise me," Katherine said, sudden fear gripping her heart. "Promise me you won't disappear. Promise me this is real." "I promise." Quentin's gray eyes were steady and sure. "I've been alone and drifting for 10 years, but I'm done drifting now. I found what I was looking for, and I'm not letting it go. I'm not letting you go." They stood in the hallway for a long time, holding each other, making quiet promises about a future they would build together. When Quentin finally left, Katherine went to bed with her heart full, and her mind spinning with hope and possibility. The next morning, Quentin came by before dawn to say goodbye. They stood in the early morning light, and he kissed her once more, thoroughly, before swinging up onto Dawson's back. "Sunday," he promised. "I'll be back Sunday." Katherine watched him ride south out of town, her hand raised in farewell, and felt the ache of separation already settling into her bones. But underneath, the ache was something stronger, certainty. This wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. The days passed in a blur of work and waiting. Katherine threw herself into her sewing, earning Emma Bradley's respect with her skill and work ethic. She paid back Quentin's loan to Mrs. Douglas within 4 days, which made her feel less like a charity case and more like a woman standing on her own 2 feet. She made friends with the other women in town, particularly Mrs. Douglas's daughter Molly, who was 19 and full of romantic notions about Katherine and Quentin's story. "It's like something from a novel," Molly sighed, helping Katherine hang laundry behind the hotel on Saturday afternoon. The cowboy rescuing the stranded maiden and then they fall in love. "It's so romantic," Katherine laughed. "It wasn't particularly romantic at the time. I thought I was going to die." "But you didn't, because Mr. York found you. That's fate, Miss Emerson. That's destiny." Katherine wasn't sure she believed in destiny, but she couldn't deny that finding Quentin felt like something more than simple luck. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, and Katherine was up early, wearing her best dress, which wasn't saying much given that she only had the one. She had washed and pressed it carefully, and Emma had given her a length of blue ribbon that she used to tie back her dark hair. She was sitting on the porch of the hotel when Quentin rode into town just after 8. Her heart leaped at the sight of him, tall in the saddle, scanning the street until his eyes found her. The smile that broke across his face made her insides flutter. He dismounted in front of the hotel and took the steps 2 at a time, pulling her into his arms and kissing her right there in public, not caring who saw. Katherine kissed him back, joy bubbling up inside her like champagne. "I missed you," Quentin said against her lips. "Every damn day I missed you." "I missed you too," Katherine said, pulling back to look at him properly. "How was the ranch? Busy? We've been moving cattle to better grazing and one of the bulls decided to make trouble, but it's all sorted now and I've got the whole day free." Quentin tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I want to spend every minute of it with you." They walked through town together, Quentin's arm around her waist in a possessive gesture that made Katherine feel cherished and claimed. They attended Sunday service at the little white church, sitting together in a pew while the congregation whispered and speculated about them. After the service, Quentin shook hands with what seemed like every man in town and was charming to all the women, but his eyes never left Katherine for long. They had lunch at the hotel, then took a walk out of town to a creek Quentin knew, where cottonwoods provided shade and the water ran clear over smooth stones. They sat on the bank, Katherine's head on Quentin's shoulder, and talked about everything and nothing, building the foundation of intimacy that would sustain them through the separations to come. "Tell me about the bar," Katherine said, trailing her fingers through the water. "What's it like there?" "It's a good spread, about 5,000 acres of decent grazing land. The main house is solid and there's a bunkhouse for the hands. The foreman, Jack Murphy, runs a tight ship, but he's fair. The owner lives in Cheyenne and only comes out a few times a year, so Jack pretty much manages everything." Quentin paused, then added, "There's talk of Jack retiring in a year or 2. He's getting older and his wife wants him to take it easier. The owner will need a new foreman." Katherine turned to look at him. "Are you thinking of applying?" "I'm thinking about it. Foreman pays better than regular hand and it comes with a house. A small one, but a house nonetheless." Quentin met her eyes, his expression serious. "A house where a man could bring a wife if he had one." Katherine's breath caught. "Quentin, I'm not proposing. Not yet. We haven't known each other long enough and I want to do this properly. But I'm telling you what I'm thinking about, what I'm planning for. A future where I'm not just drifting anymore. A future with you if you'll have it." "I'll have it," Katherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll have you, and whatever future we can build together." Quentin kissed her again, deep and sweet, and they spent the rest of the afternoon wrapped up in each other, making plans and dreams. When evening came, Quentin walked Katherine back to the hotel, kissed her good night at the door to her room, and promised to return the following Sunday. And he did. Every Sunday for the next 2 months, Quentin rode into Opal to spend the day with Katherine. They became a fixture in town, the cowboy and the seamstress, and people smiled when they saw them together. Katherine's skills had made her indispensable to Emma Bradley, and she was earning enough to save a little money after paying for her room and board. She felt more settled and content than she had since her parents died. In mid-October, a deputy from the next county rode into Opal with news. Silas Coburn had been arrested when his wagon train passed through, and after questioning, he had admitted to abandoning Katherine on the trail. Her belongings had been recovered from the wagon where Coburn had stored them, and the deputy had brought them with him. Katherine stood in the sheriff's office, staring at the familiar trunk that held everything she had brought from St. Louis. Inside were her clothes, her mother's jewelry, her father's books, and the letters from Gerald Watson, the man she had been traveling to Oregon to marry. She picked up the packet of letters, feeling their weight in her hand, and realized she felt nothing. No obligation, no guilt, no sense of loss. That future had been someone else's dream, someone else's desperate attempt at security. This future, the one she was building here in Opal with Quentin, was hers. She took the letters to the small stove in the corner of the sheriff's office and fed them into the flames, watching them curl and blacken and turn to ash. The sheriff watched her but said nothing, understanding written on his weathered face. "Thank you for bringing my things," Katherine said. "I'm grateful." That Sunday, when Quentin arrived, Katherine was wearing a new dress she had made from fabric in her trunk, a deep green that brought out the color of her eyes. Quentin's reaction when he saw her made the hours of sewing worth it. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You always look beautiful, but right now, you're taking my breath away." Katherine took his hand and led him out of town to their spot by the creek, where fall leaves were turning gold and red overhead. When they reached the bank, she turned to face him, her heart pounding. "I have something to tell you," she said. "The deputy brought my belongings back, everything Coburn took from me." "That's wonderful," Quentin said, clearly confused about why she seemed nervous. "Among my things were letters from Gerald Watson, the man I was supposed to marry in Oregon." Katherine took a deep breath. I burned them because I'm not going to Oregon and I'm not marrying him. That future died when the wagon train left me behind, and I'm glad it did, because it led me to you." Quentin stared at her, something fierce and possessive flashing in his eyes. "Katherine, I'm staying here," she continued. "I'm building a life here, and I'm happy, happier than I've ever been. And I know we said we wouldn't rush things, but Quentin, I'm absolutely sure about you, about us. So if you were planning to ask me something eventually, you can ask me now." For a moment, Quentin just looked at her, emotions playing across his face too quickly to name. Then he dropped to one knee in the fallen leaves, taking her hand in both of his. "Katherine Emerson, I love you. I love your strength and your courage and your stubborn refusal to give up even when everything is against you. I love the way you laugh and the way you think and the way you make me feel like I'm home after years of wandering. I'm not a rich man, and I can't offer you an easy life, but I can offer you my heart and my loyalty and every bit of love I have in me. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife?" Tears streamed down Katherine's face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes. Yes, Quentin, I'll marry you. I'll be your wife and we'll build a life together, and I'll love you for the rest of my days." Quentin surged to his feet and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, pouring all his love and joy and relief into it, and Katherine kissed him back with everything she had. They were married 3 weeks later in the little white church in Opal, with Emma Bradley standing up for Katherine and Jack Murphy standing up for Quentin. Half the town attended, along with several of the hands from the bar. Katherine wore a dress she had made herself from ivory fabric that Emma had given her as a wedding gift, and she had never felt more beautiful or more certain of anything in her life. Quentin looked handsome in new clothes, his dark hair neatly combed and his gray eyes bright with emotion as he watched Katherine walk down the aisle toward him. When the minister asked if he took Katherine to be his wife, his "I do" was strong and clear, a vow that echoed in the small church. Katherine's own "I do" was just as firm, and when Quentin kissed her as his wife for the first time, the church erupted in applause and cheers. They spent their wedding night in the hotel room that had been Katherine's home for the past 3 months, but which now felt like the beginning of their shared life together. Quentin was gentle and patient, making sure Katherine felt cherished and loved, and when they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Katherine felt complete in a way she had never experienced before. The next morning, they loaded Katherine's trunk onto a wagon Quentin had borrowed and made the 15-mile journey to the bar. Katherine's new home was a small cabin near the main ranch complex, 2 rooms with a stone fireplace and a real floor. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and solid, and it was theirs. Katherine threw herself into making the cabin a home, using her sewing skills to make curtains and quilts, and slowly acquiring the pots and pans and dishes they needed. Quentin worked long days on the ranch, but he always came home to her in the evenings, and they would sit together by the fire, talking about their days and making plans for the future. Life on the ranch was hard but satisfying. Katherine took in sewing work from the other ranch wives and from women in Opal, earning her own money and contributing to their household. She learned to manage their small vegetable garden, to preserve food for winter, to make do and make things last. It was a far cry from the life she had imagined as a shopkeeper's wife in Oregon, but it was real and it was hers, built with her own hands alongside the man she loved. In the spring, Jack Murphy announced his retirement, and the ranch owner offered the foreman position to Quentin. It came with better pay and a bigger house, a real 2-bedroom place with a proper kitchen and a porch. Quentin accepted, and they moved their small collection of belongings to their new home, both of them giddy with the feeling of moving up in the world. Quentin was a natural leader, and the ranch hands respected him. He worked alongside them rather than above them, and he treated everyone fairly. The ranch prospered under his management, and their reputation grew. The owner was pleased, and at the end of Quentin's first year as foreman, he received a generous bonus that they used to buy better furniture and a few small luxuries. In the winter of their second year of marriage, Katherine realized she was pregnant. She told Quentin one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully as the news sank in. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he whooped with joy, picking her up and spinning her around until she was laughing and demanding to be put down. "We're having a baby," Quentin said, wonder in his voice. "We're having a baby, Katherine." "We are," Katherine confirmed, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "In late summer, the doctor thinks." Quentin dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her stomach, his arms wrapped around her waist. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "Your papa loves you already. And your mama loves you, and we're going to take such good care of you." Katherine ran her fingers through Quentin's hair, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. This life they were building, this family they were creating, was everything she had never known she wanted. Their son was born in August of 1879, a healthy baby with his father's gray eyes and a good set of lungs. They named him Samuel James York, after both their fathers, and he was the center of their world from the moment he drew his first breath. Quentin was a devoted father, coming home from even the longest days on the ranch to hold his son and help Katherine with the endless work of caring for an infant. He would sit by the fire with Samuel in his arms, talking to the baby about horses and cattle and the wide Wyoming sky, and Katherine would watch them with her heart in her throat, overwhelmed by how much she loved them both. When Samuel was 2, they were blessed with a daughter, whom they named Lucy Grace. She had Katherine's dark hair and Quentin's smile, and she was as stubborn as both her parents combined. Samuel adored his little sister, and Quentin joked that they were going to have their hands full when she got older. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, and Quentin's reputation as a skilled manager grew. They saved money and invested in a few head of cattle of their own, building their own small herd alongside Quentin's work for the Bar M. It was hard work, but they were building something together, creating a legacy for their children. When Katherine was 30, the ranch owner made Quentin an offer to buy a section of the Bar M land at a favorable price, 2,000 acres with good water access. It was an opportunity they couldn't pass up, even though it meant taking on debt. They did it anyway, and suddenly they weren't just ranch employees anymore. They were ranchers in their own right, partners with the Bar M but also independent. Quentin York Ranch started small, but it grew steadily under their management. Quentin's years of experience served them well, and Katherine's careful management of their finances kept them afloat in the lean years. Samuel grew into a capable young man who loved the ranch life, and Lucy surprised everyone by being as good with horses as any hand they employed. By the time Katherine was 40, they had a modest but successful operation, 300 head of cattle, good horses, and a home that had grown to accommodate their family and the life they had built. They added on to the house over the years, building more rooms as they could afford them, creating a comfortable place that reflected their love and their work. Samuel married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, and they built a cabin on York land to raise their own family. Lucy, stubborn and independent as ever, announced she had no interest in marriage and wanted to train horses professionally. Quentin and Katherine supported her, proud of the strong, capable woman she had become. On a warm evening in late summer, Katherine and Quentin sat on their porch, watching the sun set over land that belonged to them. They were in their late 40s now, weathered by sun and wind and hard work, but happy in a deep way that came from a life well lived. "Do you ever think about that day?" Quentin asked, his hand wrapped around hers. "The day I found you walking east, all the time," Katherine admitted. "I think about how I felt, how certain I was that I was going to die, and I think about how you came riding out of nowhere and saved me." "You saved yourself," Quentin said firmly. "You were walking east, refusing to give up. I just gave you a ride to the next chapter." Katherine turned to look at him, this man who had been her husband for more than 20 years, the father of her children, her partner in every sense of the word. The gray in his hair made him distinguished, and the lines on his face were maps of laughter and hard work. She loved him more now than she had the day she married him, if such a thing was possible. "You gave me everything," she said softly. "A home, a family, a life worth living. You gave me love and respect and partnership. You gave me a reason to keep walking east." Quentin raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, his gray eyes warm and full of all the years they had shared. "You gave me the same, Katherine. You gave me a place to belong after years of drifting. You gave me love and a family and something to work for beyond my own survival. You gave me everything that matters." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge overhead, the same stars that had watched over them that first night when Quentin had camped with her by the creek. So much had changed since then, but the fundamentals remained the same. They had chosen each other, and they had built a life together through love and hard work and unwavering commitment. Samuel came walking up the path with his wife and their young son, coming for their weekly Sunday dinner. Lucy rode in from the training pens, dusty and grinning, leading a young horse that was finally accepting a saddle. The house filled with noise and laughter and life. 3 generations gathered around Catherine's table to share a meal and each other's company. Later, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, Quentin and Katherine lay in their bed, wrapped in each other's arms the way they had been for 20 years of nights. "Happy," Quentin murmured against her hair. "More than I ever imagined I could be," Katherine said, snuggling closer to his warmth. "When the wagon train left me that day, I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing left. And now I have everything." Katherine tilted her head back to kiss him softly. "I have you and our children and this life we built together. I have a home and a family and love that fills me up until I think I might burst from it. I have everything that matters." Quentin held her close, and they drifted off to sleep together, secure in the knowledge that they had found exactly what they needed in each other. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges as all years do. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, market crashes and cattle diseases. They celebrated grandchildren and mourned losses. Samuel and his wife had 4 children who filled the ranch with noise and joy. Lucy eventually did marry, surprising everyone, to a horse trainer from Montana who respected her independence and skill. They settled on York land as well, building their own cabin and running a successful horse breeding operation. Quentin and Katherine grew older gracefully, handing over more and more of the daily ranch operations to Samuel while still remaining active and involved. They became the patriarch and matriarch of a growing family, respected in the community and known for their fairness and generosity. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, the house bursting with noise and laughter and love. Someone asked Katherine to tell the story of how she and Quentin met, and she obliged, telling the tale of the wagon train that left her behind and the cowboy who found her walking east. The grandchildren listened with wide eyes, as amazed by the story as if they were hearing it for the first time, even though they had heard it dozens of times before. When Katherine finished, the youngest grandchild, a serious little girl named Emma after Katherine's first employer in Opal, asked, "Weren't you scared, Grandma?" "Terrified," Katherine admitted. "I thought I was going to die out there. But Grandpa saved you." "He did," Katherine agreed, meeting Quentin's eyes across the room. "But more than that, we saved each other. I was alone and lost, and he was drifting without purpose. We found each other at exactly the right moment, and we chose to build something together." "That's romantic," one of the older granddaughters sighed. "It's more than romantic," Quentin said, coming to stand beside Katherine's chair, his hand resting on her shoulder. "It's the best decision I ever made. Finding your grandmother, choosing to help her, and then choosing to love her every day since then. That's the story of my life, and I wouldn't change a single part of it." Katherine reached up to cover his hand with hers, feeling the familiar calluses and strength in his grip. They had been holding hands for 30 years, and it still felt like coming home. The celebration continued late into the evening, and when everyone finally left or settled down to sleep in various corners of the house, Quentin and Katherine slipped out onto the porch for a few moments of quiet together. 30 years, Katherine said, leaning into Quentin's side. "Can you believe it? Some days it feels like yesterday that I found you walking east," Quentin said. Other days, I can barely remember life before you. It's like you've always been there, like my life didn't really start until the moment I saw you. I feel the same way." Katherine turned to look up at him. "I was so angry when the wagon train left me. I felt betrayed and abandoned and terrified. But if it hadn't happened, I would have gone to Oregon and married Gerald Watson, and I never would have met you. I never would have had this life." "Maybe it was fate," Quentin suggested with a smile. "Maybe Molly Douglas was right all those years ago when she said it was destiny." "Maybe," Katherine agreed. "Or maybe we just got very, very lucky. Either way, I'm grateful. Every single day, I'm grateful that you found me and that I had the sense to trust you." Quentin kissed the top of her head. "I'm the one who should be grateful. You took a chance on a drifting cowboy with nothing but a horse and a dream of something better. You believed in me, believed in us, and you helped me build a life worth living." They stood together on the porch, looking out over the land they had worked so hard to build and protect. The ranch was thriving. Their children were happy and settled, and their grandchildren were growing up surrounded by love and opportunity. It was everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of during those early days when they were young and in love, and just beginning to build their life together. As they grew older still, into their 60s and beyond, Quentin and Katherine remained inseparable. They had grown old together, their bodies showing the wear of years of hard work and hard living, but their love had only deepened with time. They knew each other's thoughts before they were spoken, could communicate with a glance or a touch, moved through their days with the synchronized grace of two people who had been partners for a lifetime. Samuel took over the ranch entirely, running it with the same skill and integrity his father had shown. Lucy's horse training operation had become renowned throughout Wyoming and beyond, bringing prestige and income to the family. The grandchildren were growing into capable, kind young people who carried forward the values Quentin and Katherine had instilled. On a cool autumn evening when Katherine was 67 and Quentin was 70, they sat on their porch wrapped in blankets, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Quentin's hair was white now, and Katherine's dark locks had faded to silver, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love in the Wyoming wilderness so many years ago. "You have any regrets?" Katherine asked, a question she had never asked before. Quentin was quiet for a long moment, considering. "Not about the big things. Not about choosing you or this life or this place. Those were the best decisions I ever made." He paused. "Sometimes I regret not telling you sooner how much I loved you that first week. I was trying to be a gentleman, trying to do things right, but I loved you from almost the first moment, Katherine. I should have told you sooner." Katherine smiled. "I knew. Even when you were being careful and respectful, I could see it in your eyes. You loved me before you were ready to admit it." "What about you? Any regrets?" "Only that I didn't have more time with you," Katherine said softly. "However many years we get, it will never be enough. I could live 1,000 lifetimes with you and still want more." Quentin's eyes grew bright with emotion, and he reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Then I'll find you in the next life and the one after that. I'll always find you, Katherine, just like I found you walking east all those years ago." "Promise me," Katherine said, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. "Promise me that this wasn't just luck or chance. Promise me that we were meant to find each other." "I promise," Quentin said, pulling her close and holding her with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding night 45 years ago. "We were meant to find each other. Your wagon train left you behind so that I could find you. I rode that particular route that particular day so that our paths would cross. Everything in our lives led us to that moment, and everything since has been the life we were meant to live together." They sat together until the stars came out, until the night grew cold enough that they had to go inside. They went to bed wrapped in each other's arms, the way they had every night for 45 years, and Katherine fell asleep feeling safe and loved and complete. Quentin York died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Katherine holding his hand. The doctor said his heart simply gave out, worn down by years of hard work and hard living, but that he had gone without pain or fear. Katherine knew the truth. Quentin had lived a full life and had been ready to rest, secure in the knowledge that he had built something lasting and had been deeply loved. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Wyoming. Ranchers and ranch hands, business owners from Opal, friends and neighbors from throughout the territory, all came to pay their respects to a man who had been universally respected and admired. Samuel and Lucy spoke about their father with love and pride, and the grandchildren wept for the loss of the man who had been the foundation of their family. Katherine stood beside the grave and said her own private goodbye to the man who had saved her life in more ways than one. She told him she loved him, that she would carry him in her heart until they met again, and that she was grateful for every single day they had shared together. After Quentin's death, Katherine lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still sharp-minded and capable despite her age. She continued to sew, to tell stories about the old days, to dispense wisdom and love in equal measure. But everyone could see that a light had gone out in her, that some essential part of her was simply waiting to join Quentin wherever he had gone. On a spring morning when the wildflowers were blooming and the grass was green, Katherine Emerson York died peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her weathered face. Her children found her with her hands folded over a faded photograph of Quentin from their wedding day, and they knew she had finally rejoined the love of her life. They buried her beside Quentin on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, with a view of the eastern horizon where the sun rose each morning. The headstone read, "Katherine Emerson York, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she walked east and found home." The York Ranch continued to thrive under Samuel's management and eventually passed to his children, and then to their children. The story of how Quentin and Katherine met became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of courage, love, and the power of choosing to help someone in need. But more than that, their love story lived on in the values they had instilled in their family. Integrity, hard work, compassion, and the understanding that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when everything seems lost. The wagon train had left Katherine behind, but in doing so, had given her the chance to find something far better than what she had been seeking. And Quentin, the drifting cowboy looking for a place to belong, had found his purpose in loving and protecting the strong woman who refused to give up even when the odds were against her. Their love had been real and deep and lasting, built on mutual respect and partnership, strengthened by years of shared work and shared dreams. They had built a life together from nothing but determination and love, and that life had flourished into something beautiful and enduring. Decades later, when the great-great-grandchildren of Katherine and Quentin gathered on the ranch for family reunions, they would walk up the hill to visit the graves of the founders of their family legacy. They would stand beside those weathered headstones and feel the weight of history and love that had brought them all into being. And sometimes, on warm summer evenings when the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of gold, people claimed they could see two figures walking hand in hand across the prairie, a tall cowboy and a dark-haired woman, forever walking east toward the horizon and the home they had built together, their love story written in the very land itself, eternal and unbreakable. The wagon party had left her behind, but a cowboy had found her walking east, and from that moment of seeming disaster had come a love story for the ages, a family legacy that would endure for generations, and the proof that sometimes being lost is the first step to being found. Their story was one of the American West, of courage and survival and the power of human connection in a harsh and unforgiving land. But more than that, it was a story of two lonely souls who found each other at exactly the right moment and chose to build something beautiful together, something that would outlast their own lives and become part of the very fabric of the land they had loved and worked so hard to tame. Katherine Emerson had walked east expecting to die, but had instead found life in its fullest sense. Quentin York had been drifting aimlessly, but had found his purpose in loving and protecting her. Together, they had created something that mattered, something that endured, something that proved that love could thrive even in the harshest conditions if it was built on a foundation of respect, partnership, and unwavering commitment. And in the end, that was the greatest gift they had given to their children and grandchildren and all the generations that would follow. The knowledge that love was worth fighting for, that family was worth building, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually the doorways to the best things that will ever happen to us. The wagon party left without her in the middle of nowhere. A cowboy found her walking east, and from that meeting came everything that mattered: love, family, home, and a legacy that would endure long after both of them had returned to the earth they had worked so hard to cultivate. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a promise kept. Two people who had been lost had found each other, and in finding each other had found themselves. And that, in the end, was everything.